From the USA to Merseyside and beyond, welcome to the Blue Frontier. Insightful Everton analysis for every Blue with James Boyman, Ryan Williams, and Shan.
Greetings, Toffees. Welcome back to the Blue Frontier, coming to you shortly after the transfer window has officially shut until January. It was a busy day for many clubs across Europe, and Everton were among them. We talked a lot on this pod about waiting until the window was shut before making any final judgments. Well, that day has at last arrived, so this is our final judgment summary. James here, joined by Ryan and Shan. Before we get into it, if you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. Follow us on socials. Join our Discord, which was almost as active as I think it's ever been today, leading up to the deadline. So with that, let's get into the business. Starting off, Everton under-21 winger Isaac Heath has joined League Two club Accrington Stanley on a season-long loan. Then Youssef Chermiti completing his permanent move to Rangers. Fee could rise up to £10 million if add-ons are triggered. There's also a significant sell-on clause in that deal. News coming to us from Paddy Boyland. Also from Paddy Boyland, Tyler Onyango has joined Stockport County on loan. And last but not least, the big move of the day for the Toffees, Freiburg midfielder Merlin Röhl. The 23-year-old is on course to join. It's a loan with a conditional obligation to make the move permanent for €20 million. Gentlemen, a busy day. Our thoughts on deadline day before we get into the window as a whole.
I think a couple things. Röhl is a bit of a strange acquisition for me. He doesn't necessarily fit a need. Not really, not perfectly. We reviewed him in our team assessment as a cam. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think at least when I watched him initially, I liked a lot of what I saw. He's got a great physical profile. The skills are there. I love the scanning, the awareness. He seemed like a very intelligent player. The work rate was there. Not very aggressive, not overly physical, even though he's probably 6'3", 6'4", and he's got a little stronger. But I think the difference is the way Freiburg used him was maybe not right. And we evaluate him the way he was playing, but I think when I watched him this morning with the U21s, it was totally different. He was playing a little bit deeper. He had the captain armband, too, and that was against England as well, going up against Anderson in the middle, who's a physical guy, and looked really good. He's carrying the ball very strongly. I mean, someone made a comparison to Decore. I think people forget about how Decore was with Watford, but he was more of a box-to-box player. And I have gotten some information on the backside about how they were looking at him, and the previous recruitment team and the scouting team now has always seen him as an 8. But for that, I like the potential. €25 million as an obligation in the summer. I don't know how I feel about that. That seems a little bit steep. He really just hasn't been that effective in the Bundesliga, though. And that's my only concern, guys. He's in good position. He seems very smart, but you either like to clatter people or you don't. And I'm not saying we need to have some meathead in there, but you need a certain element of physicality and a certain level of aggression that I don't see, but the tools are all there.
I can't really add much to Merlin. Interested to see how his fit is on Merseyside. I think one thing that we kind of didn't mention is Harrison Armstrong, of course, going to Preston, and that kind of allows us to fill that number in terms of just midfield depth. So I think for me as a whole, and we'll really get into it, a bit of a disappointment not to fill our really major needs. However, the body of work, what has been done in the summer, there's a lot of things to be impressed about, right? And I think the committee, there's a lot that could have went worse, in my opinion. And so I know the committee gets a lot of tomatoes thrown at them from our fan base, but at the same time, I think as a whole, given especially too that everyone's kind of coming in a little bit late to the party, I think they've done a pretty decent job.
What are you guys' thoughts on Chermiti, though? That one doesn't sit very well with me because I feel like you've got him at the low end of his value. I think he's a talented player. I think he'll probably do very well at Rangers. It might take him a little bit of time. He could deal with the pressure, I would assume, coming up with Sporting. I think they're going to pay under $8 million for him, at least up front. I don't like that deal because you would think a loan would work. Now, maybe they weren't willing to take a loan. Maybe you take him a loan elsewhere, but just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I think something about it is just so reminiscent of the Everton we've come to know under Farhad Mashiri, which is you sign a really promising young player, they never get a meaningful chance, and then you sell them for a minimal fee out the door. And I think when Chermiti came in, it was a really exciting signing because of the high ceiling. He had the size, he had the agility, the speed, and to see that just kind of not materialize, and he's had his injury troubles. It just feels a little disappointing, and it would have been one to, if we could have, hold on to him, loan him out to a league where he'd play, and then you realize the profit. Now, I do think Everton hedged that a little bit with the sell-on clause, so they will see some benefit in the future if he continues to develop and does well at Rangers, but not to the extent you would if he was obviously still a full Everton player.
It's a bet.
I don't, but I think also too, his appetite for signing a long-term deal at this club was probably very minimal, and I think they probably assessed the risk because let's just say if he doesn't kick on at Rangers and he has another injury-plagued spell for another year, right? Like with 12 months left on his contract going to the summer, what's his value going to be then, right? So I think it's a calculated risk. I understand you lose a lot of potential in regards to him actually doing well, like you said, Ryan, at Rangers for a season, and then his value probably goes up. But I also just don't see him wanting to sign a longer term deal here, which of course limits our ability, right, to kind of negotiate in the future.
Yeah, I don't see even if he, had another injury-prone year. The one thing that people don't got to remember, these 19-year-olds, when you invest in them, people think it's so much risk, they tend to keep their value pretty well. And I just think it's a low number. But up for debate either way. I hope he knocks it off. He seems like a good kid and a good player. But I think, look, today was interesting. I think we would like to see more business being done, but probably the best thing to do is kind of take a step back and really take a look at the window, I think, as a collective, because it's really hard to judge one day when you've had all these months to do business, and Everton have made a lot of moves and spent some money, to your point earlier, Shan. And I think probably the best way to look at it is kind of look at the positional needs before the window. I think that's a good way we did that. Please check out our team assessments. If you haven't seen it, we put a lot of work into them. The first thing that's worth saying is we had significant losses in terms of numbers. I don't want us to look at replacements, though, because the teams weren't great. Decore was one. I know we're going to miss Neil Mopai badly. Ashley Young, that type of thing. But I think we had three major needs: right back, defensive mid, and right wing. I think we had some interim needs. I think another midfielder would be useful. Maybe a bit of a Merlin Röhl type, but maybe more of a ball player that could sit deep and ping it around, progress the ball up the field. Maybe a left-footed cam or right-wing backup. Maybe that's one we talked about. Backup keeper, and then I think the lower needs were backup left back. Maybe it's a higher need that we say. Fourth center back and backup right back and third goalkeeper. And I think if we look at the window as a whole, the net spends about 122 million euros, we think. I have some numbers later if you want to talk about PSR. We talked about a lot of the senior moves, a couple of U21 moves too. Metcalf went out on a permanent, but other than that, some of our talented guys I think went out on loan. Sheriff looks like he's already done okay so far in League One for Rotherham. Let's see. Okoronkwo, I think, is an interesting player too. I think he scored for Lincoln City too and has done some things. He's still so young, 20. And Fraser Barnsley, I think we'll see. That's a National League North, not as big a deal. But those other two guys are pretty interesting. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen more guys go out, and I don't know if they're still able to, but I think they probably are. Other than that, Isaac Heath going out and everything, I think most of the news is still on the senior team. And so, I think it's interesting to go through position by position maybe and kind of talk about our team assessments and some of the guys we picked and whether we got it right, got it wrong, whether they looked at the window differently. And I think that's kind of a good way to do at least a quick analysis. So why don't we start with goalkeeper? I don't think we had a lot of real strong opinions on this one, did we?
I think when you look at Jordan Pickford was the clear starter. You just needed someone maybe to provide depth and hedge your bets in the case that he had a little bit of an injury. I think we didn't mention Travers on our goalkeeper team assessment, but for £4 million, he's pretty decent. Actually, a very good backup for the Premier League level, so I think we're all pretty content with that. Seemed a little surprising that he'd be interested in a move to Everton where he's not going to see those types of minutes, but beyond that, it is very good quality depth there.
It's probably exceeding our expectations on that one. Shan, right? You think that number's not too bad either for him?
Yeah, especially when you look at the landscape of goalkeepers and where they've went, Mats Hermansen, right, for about 17, 18 million, a few others.
You love him.
So credit to them for kind of getting into the market before it started to get crazy, right, where you saw just kind of teams just go a little bit bonkers, whether it be injuries or ineffectiveness, United. So, yeah, it's just for us, good good on the team. And then, of course, Tom King, just a culture setter in the dressing room as well. We can't forget about him.
Yeah, interesting. And, it is funny how people panic, especially at that position sometimes at the end of the window. Left back, I think we identified and got it kind of right. We wanted to look at a younger player that could play behind Mikalenko, knowing he had a year. We wanted someone with a high ceiling. There were lots of names out there. I think we almost universally loved Asnu, or at least the idea behind him. Looking forward to seeing him more. We got to see him live. Hey, how about that? Other people didn't. Hope that doesn't turn into a James situation. But, right, I mean, I think we got that one pretty much right. What about center back? I mean, I think there's a couple different schools of thought there. It's go get the fourth center back, someone who could kind of fill in. I thought maybe getting someone younger might be a good idea. I also like the idea of getting someone who maybe could play multiple positions. We opted to go with Michael Keane, and who's filled in admirably well. I mean, there's no argument. He's been pretty good. I don't think we know what wage he's on, certainly on a lower wage than he was before. Curious your thoughts, guys?
I mean, I went on record at the time to say I think you could do a lot worse than Michael Keane in your fourth center back spot. And while the door was open to add some versatility and someone who can cover multiple positions, I think the first few matches of the season have kind of vindicated my viewpoint that Michael Keane is a half decent stand-in should we have any major injuries elsewhere in the position. So the Jake O'Brien situation, which I don't think is by any means ideal, but Keane's done well, and credit to him. So low cost, relatively inexpensive, and he's reasonably reliable.
I think the team did well there. Like James, I was on record saying that I was happy for Keane to be the fourth center back. I know he gets a lot of issues with our fan base, remembering a lot of his mistakes, but when he's in a run of good form, he usually kind of stays there for a bit. So credit to him.
Yeah, playing the higher line, I think, is complicated for him, but sitting deep in defending, he's always been pretty decent, just some mistakes in there. I'm kind of happy about some of the guys we avoided. You know what I mean? Like, you look at those names, I mean, would we have been happy with any of those guys?
John Stones and Esteve. Yeah, I think there was definitely a bit of a minefield to navigate here. The committee avoided quite deftly, actually.
Nathan Ake as well, right? It's just we don't need to spend that amount of resource on guys like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could point to maybe Ake subbing in from some other positions, but not at the wage that he would care for. Yeah, I mean, who was the other one? Omo Bamadele? Yeah, no, not good enough. So, and there's no point in getting someone that really can't do it. So you might as well pick some continuity on the team with some leadership, and I think people like Michael Keane in general. He's not a problem child, and Moyes deserves some guys like that. Okay, right back. This one's worth talking about. We didn't have one, so I think we all like Tete. That's an interesting idea. Not unreasonable that Fulham had to, fight us off for him and was probably going to go there. I know we love Thiago Santos. He's still probably out until September. Maybe make a move for him in January. You never know. I think we're all very excited today, maybe with the chance of getting Hector Ford on loan with an option, because that kid's super talented. Similar situation to Asnu, but this person has to play. I mean, Juanlu Sanchez not moving was kind of mind-boggling to me. There were a lot of right backs that moved too, but some other guys too expensive, like Vanderson, Gueladule, Singo went to Gala for freaking 30 million euros. I don't know. Wesley at 25 million. I can't believe we didn't get a loan from Roma. A couple other moves today. I felt like there were some opportunities that we didn't jump on.
The big one to me, which irks me just because I feel like this is one that we could have been on, is Gertruda on a loan with an option to buy for Sunderland, right? I think that could have been a guy that would have fit in pretty well for us at the starting right back position. It's funny, Ryan, I actually took a pretty decent look at the right backs that moved this window. It wasn't as robust of a market as I thought it would be if you look before the window and now. However, I think there was some business to potentially be done for the club. I think also look at a loan. I know they were kind of looking at Hector Ford, but that didn't materialize. It's just one of those where we probably thought to leave it near the end and maybe something would happen. So it's just kind of disappointing from the club's perspective that we weren't able to address that in any capacity.
Yeah, but I mean, Justin went for way more than I think he should have. Glad we avoided that one. Soufal, glad we avoided that one too. I wanted nothing to do with him. He's not good enough. Walker Peters is interesting. Walker, glad we ducked that one. I mean, that would have been a terrible move. Yeah, so I think we, in some of these conditions, I think who we avoided was probably more important than who we didn't get. But I hope to dear God that Bobble's rumor that Moyes rejected a Sanchez for Pato type trade loan-wise didn't happen, especially if it came with even an obligation to buy Sanchez. That would be disaster for me. I hope to dear heavens that didn't happen. Still, there are guys out there that we didn't move for, which I'm not happy about. I think this is a big failure to the window. We move into midfielders. I think the key here is resigning Idrissa Gana Gueye. I mean, imagine what the heck happened without him. Our big choices, I mean, I love Rocco Reitz. I think people are waiting for his clause that goes active in the summer. I thought it was already active, so we got that wrong in the assessment. Shan, you're a little disappointed.
It was funny. I was kind of thinking that we maybe go into an obligation to buy from South America, not Germany. So to not look at, let's just say, Pablo Maya or Juan Sforza, I think is a bit of a disappointment. Just because also, too, from a numbers standpoint, that's a position that we can use guys.
Normally the best time to buy from South America is January. So if we weren't, the committee wasn't really together and the whole recruitment team, some of the new guys weren't in, maybe that's something to look for in January. I still think we could do business. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some guys that we could sell, too.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're Nottingham Forest, right? Because they just buy from Brazil every single month of the year, it seems like. So Botafogo. But I think the theme, though, something to capture is who we didn't buy, right? Because I think the committee did a good job of having some restraint almost at every position, I would say, and just not making this impulse purchase. I think Hayden Hackney is a very popular name. Thomas Souček, I know fans are throwing a parade probably right now that we did not spend any sort of capital on him. I got a real chuckle out of Josh Brownhill because he rejected Wolves today.
Still a free agent. Still a free agent, man.
He'd rather play for no one than Wolverhampton Wanderers, right? Great time for Vitor. Of course, Lamine Camara, massive. I think we're all massive fans of him, but it's just a very high outlay of cash to get a guy like that. And then I know Yves Bissouma, of course, was a discussion point, but I think the off-the-field issues are probably something that would push teams away. That's why Turkey made more sense. John McGinn, no thanks, and Dion Lope. It's just you can't command a fee like that and get a player like that to be sold.
No, I think the best part about this is you had some feelings there might be some manager-led recruitment push here, too. I know Moyes apparently loves McGinn, loves him, adores him. I don't know what that says about a man, but Souček, too, he's a fan, obviously, and I don't think either of those two are really going to be able to do what we'd want them to do in that position or give us a whole lot different. Do we miss out on anything, though? Luiz is leaving from Benfica for 20 to 25 million. I mean, he's a pretty good player. I mean, he's functionally the right one.
That's a loan, though, Ryan. That's a loan with the option. So, I mean, that is something that I think from an Everton point of view probably would have been kind of in our favor. I think it's just he probably gets more playing time there, right? So that's probably why he might have, or we just might not have offered. So I don't know. Jashari, of course, we were very high on. He's out for a few months, though. Just got a pretty bad injury.
Big money. I mean, I don't think we're surprised at that fee, though. What, no. 35 mil? I mean, that's probably what we thought it would be.
Yeah, but I'm not too annoyed at this one where you have to go big at this position, right? And if you're not going to go big, you'd rather just not go at all.
He also avoided the Douglas Luiz.
Yes.
Would have been
great call.
A good immediate contributor, but that eye-watering obligation that they got suckered into is just prohibitive to long-term growth. So another one that we dodged effectively.
Yeah, and we'll see how many of these guys can play deeper. I mean, Moyes may want to play a little bit deeper. Yeah, I'm so happy we missed out on the Hackney thing. I just don't think he can do it. I was disappointed. No youngin from France, though. It's true. Whether it was Cisse or Mukau, it's just fun to say. I think that was a little bit disappointing. So again, I think there's some missed opportunities there too, but it was a little bit of an odd market, maybe even light in that arena. And Röhl looks like more of a suitor for kind of a box to box. So we'll see how he works out in that position. Maybe Ghana can gain some discipline. I think that's possible. Left wing, we picked no one because we had so much depth there and we went huge with Jack. I mean, not much to really say about that. I mean, I don't know what we would have expected there, too. He's obviously an impact player, but, the results of that and the next position where we bought Dewsbury-Hall pushed Njai out to the right. I think that was a little unpredictable and maybe something that we didn't see. But I do think we looked at Cams maybe as left-footed options, right? Because I think we all agreed that Charlie's a good player, but Njai can move to the middle too. He has some flexibility, but Charlie's not a locked-in starter. In fact, in many ways, Charlie's almost better coming off the bench, kind of as an energy guy. I know we talked about some options. That might have been a cheaper alternative. I think the fee on Dewsbury-Hall is significant. I mean, we were talking about Voltamade, but our ballpark estimate.
Just wow, that
Yeah.
got out of hand quick.
I mean, he's a really good player. A couple other guys, too. Did we miss out on anything? I mean, McAtee was one that we talked about pretty openly. 25 million, but there are a lot of strings on that one. You know what I mean? Baturina from Zagreb going to Como. I liked him a lot. I really liked the opportunity maybe bringing a young player there. Matt O'Reilly, I thought would have been really interested. Did they complete the loan to OM? Because my guess is they probably didn't want to loan him within the Premier League, or maybe we said, well, that we don't want that to be our second loan. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, I that's a much more inexpensive option. And I just don't want people to get carried away with the fact that Dewsbury-Hall's a good player and he's playing well right now, but that shouldn't blind you from the fact that we didn't address certain needs, you know? I don't think our approach necessarily would have been wrong if we would have taken kind of our direction in the window and went big on right wing. You know what I mean? Like, it seemed like they went the other way. I'm kind of curious your guys' thoughts before we move on the approach.
I still feel a little bit like I did mid-window when it felt like we're allocating our resources to places where we have existing depth. And I think it was shaping up to be a meme of, hey, we're doing the 4-10 or 3 number 10 window yet again. And in some ways, I think there's a lot of questions to be asked about. We've certainly bolstered our attacking options, but where do these guys play? How do you fit all the pieces into this team? How do you get the best out of this 5 or 6 attacking players that we have that are all capable and are going to be expecting significant minutes? So to that end, Dewsbury-Hall did come out of nowhere a little bit for us. Wasn't really something on our radar. Started the season well, performing well, but I think you are inevitably forced into some trade-offs to try to fit him into the team.
And look, I think he's been on the radar in terms of a player, but yeah, the investment never seemed like it was right. I do like how he fits into the team in general and with Jack. Like, he's really calm on the ball, you know, and we need more of that. We have too many people that panic, that aren't accurate passers, that, you know, it makes it hard to control a game. So I kind of like the profile, maybe not the investment. I don't know. I mean, Shan, I'm curious your thoughts, and then we can kind of move on to right wing too, because I mean, they're kind of used together when we did our team assessment.
The only issue I have with Dewsbury-Hall is not, like you said, I like him as a player. I think he's a great character for the dressing room. I think he's truly skillful, right? And we've seen that in a very short sample size, but we have to almost play around him. He's really going to either be the 10 or just a not great 8. And so for me, like, you look at today where Bilal El-Khanous, right, goes to Stuttgart for a loan with an option. I mean, I think we would have had the funds, and I think that's just a much better utilization of the funds. Go to a player that's similar to Njai in his ability to play multiple positions, right, and play them well. And I think that's where I feel like when you have a player like Dewsbury-Hall that like plays a very crowded position, that forces guys like Njai to unfortunately be subject to the right wing because no one else can play it or really wants to.
Yeah, and I think that has a trickle-down effect, right? Even El-Khanous, if you made a move for him, you're kind of doubling down on an area that you're already strong on, too. I think our approach to the window was clever. I think we wanted to go big at right wing and then bring in someone that maybe could play right wing as well and stick into the middle. So, by the way, listeners, if you want to see what we thought about, hear what we thought about Merlin Röhl, I thought he was too raw, not ready to really help that much at the 10, which I still agree with. But, you know, we'll see how he develops at the 8. So I think maybe we have pegged him right. We'll see how he does. But I think our focus on right wing, you know, we love Bakwa. I still do. I hope he doesn't go to Forest. It may happen. I think he's tremendous. 35 million seems like a bit more than I would have guessed, but not way off. Shan's favorite, Fatawu. Boy, to have someone with his pace and his directness would have been a perfect contrast with someone like Tyler Dibbling, who's more patient, kind of pulls the ball with him very carefully and cleverly. But I think we also looked at Dibbling and we all liked him and thought he was talented. We just kind of wrote him off because we figured he'd be too expensive. Adingra was one that we kind of liked. There were a bunch of names that we were interested in, but I don't know if there's anything we really missed here. There are a lot of guys here that went, I think, for pretty high prices, especially English. And I think Dibbling, although it's a pretty big fee, is a really promising player and I think a guy to be excited about.
Yeah, 100%. I think we addressed the need. It wasn't one that we thought was like a bargain. He's almost a household name already at this point, and we spent big on the position. So even in doing that, not long ago they were saying 100 million or we're not budging on our position on him. And then that at the start of this window, it was 50 million, and we got a much better deal than that. So I think the patience by the committee makes a lot of sense, and I think it paid off, and we got a good one.
And I'd also say, too, the market was a bit broken in regards to right wing this summer. I think you had some pretty crazy fees for some guys. So I think all in all, you give credit to the club because I think where they got Tyler Dibbling And like you said, James, it's just to get a player of that caliber, I think at a very fair price, given his ceiling, is a credit to them. And I think it's one where you look at the committee, right? Universally, I think that's a player that everybody can get behind.
And I think they did well, Shan. I think you hit the nail on the head. We've been critical of the committee, seemed a little scattergun. We waited so long to get this deal done, but I think looking back on it, the wait was probably the right move. I don't think that's reason to be critical of them. It seems like a lot of money on the surface, but I think we universally like the player, and being English doesn't hurt. And he looks like that, and seems like the type of kid that may want to stay at Everton too. And you've got to keep some guys and build around them. Shan, you want to walk us through poll results that you put out there in the Discord?
Sure. So looking at the poll results, we wanted to ask everyone to rank the window. And I think the responses are somewhat interesting. Appreciate we got over 100 votes in less than 2 hours on both polls. So we really want to appreciate the community there. Thank you. We'll read some comments as well that kind of dive a little bit deeper. No votes for 1, 2, or 3. So the pessimism train is not alive and well right now. However, there was 1 vote out of 4. But the majority of the votes were at 5 through 8. So 10% of the votes were at 5, 17% were 6. 50% of the Discord that voted thought it was a 7, 58 votes there. 16% thought it was an 8, and then 5% thought it was 9, and then 2 people were at both a 10. So I think really the common theme, and I think that speaks to a pretty level-headed group voting 5 through 8, I think is pretty fair when you look at just kind of the pros and cons as we discussed.
Yeah, and we had some comments that followed up those votes, starting with ZXYQU. He said, a genuinely low bar. Think we did far better than just improving the squad for sure. I think that is undeniably true. I mean, this squad is levels above what Everton had at the start of the window and even last season before all the departures. There's some dramatic improvement. I don't think we got worse anywhere.
No. But I think what's important is that, it's not just about improving the squad. And I think a lot of people do say that out there in the world. They're like, did we make the squad better? I'm like, well, we had a net spend 121 million pounds. Like, of course we made it better. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be about, how much bang did you get from your buck? What needs did you address? Those types of things. I will say this, though. I like this comment from Nick. I would say Nick is a little bit on the negative side in terms of the window, but what he points out I think is really important, and we did it just now. I think a lot of the players that we avoided signing are almost more important than the players that we didn't.
Yeah, Nick's comment was, I'm happy we didn't sign Ake or Souček. That in of itself is worth celebrating. And I don't think that's an insignificant thing, because there were a lot of questions going into this window. How much influence would David Moyes have? Would he overrule other, maybe more level-headed, long-term views of recruitment? Would he be going after his old players who he loved? Would we be going after the big names from higher up in the league? And we did that in Jack Grealish, but that's a 1-year loan. Okay. There's a lot of young talent with high ceiling that were brought in this window. I think the committee deserves some credit for that and dodging some really expensive older players who would have little to no return.
We have 2 comments, and we'll summarize them both by IR Ferg, Blue Wave Kit Truther, and Matt Clevey rhymes with Chevy. They both talk about how the impact of Jack Grealish as well as Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall to the attack and how much of a different level that they both bring in not addressing the positional needs, putting Tyler Dibbling and Tiernan O'Barrow, who I know we really didn't discuss too much, but also got him at a very fair fee when you look at the striker market and how that's developed. Of course, talked about just the ability to not really solve all the needs in one summer. I don't know how much I personally agree with that, but I can appreciate the sentiment. But then at the same time, the agreement of it's hard to argue that we're not a vastly improved side, right? And I think the ability to watch this team now and enjoy the football that's in front of you, take away kind of all the future implications from some of the deals that we've made, I think speak to both of the comments well. So credit to Matt and IR Ferg for what they've said.
Yeah, I think a good counter, though, is Eds jumps in here, exclusive profile insider. I mean, people are just taking it to different levels now in the Discord.
I told him personally to do that, so I'll take the heat on that one, Eds.
Anyway, his comment is that kind of a negative is the market seems really, really reasonable. Shocked we didn't dip into it. And I kind of agree with them. I felt like there were maybe some deals to be made today. Maybe some of that was a surprise. I wouldn't expect our committee to act with any sort of quickness or deftness. But maybe Roll was a good example of that. He kind of fell into our lap. We loved the player. We wanted to do business. We knew we needed a midfielder. Maybe it wasn't the right profile, but he was the right guy for us. And we're thinking a little bit longer term. I think Spokeland really summed it up really well. Talk about missed opportunities.
Yeah, he said an El Ghazi loan would have made it a 10 out of 10. Just couldn't quite get that loan for El Ghazi. One more hurrah in Everton blue.
I think he might be a free agent as well, too. We could talk about those later. But now, look, there was great dialogue today on the Discord, but I must say I'm curious everyone else's rankings. Now, I know what I put. I think I'm changing it, though. Curious to what you all think. I'm starting off with Mr. Boyman.
And you're going to make me put a number on it. I guess that's what we do. We got to quantify it.
Yes, we do. There's
I'm gonna
accountability here.
I'm going to go kind of high.
Look, I went out there with accountability on Twitter and was told that I'm worse than cancer. The least you can do, by the way, like, seriously, man, like, I'm not very sensitive person, but I'm not, I mean, I know, maybe
it's
I'm
a
not
bit
the
much.
nicest guy. I think you're going a little over the top there.
You've gotten a little stuff that's been completely over the top. This is absurd.
I know.
But it's so funny. It's just funny because we know you and we know what a nice guy you are, and people they don't take to you very well over the internet. We'll put it that way. All right.
Serve it up. It's all on me. But no, James, spotlight on you.
Ranking the window. I'm going to go kind of high, higher than I thought I would. The Röhl signing does add, I think, an element of versatility depending on where Moyes wants to use him. I'm going to go 7.5. I'm going to go 7.5 because I just think I'm skeptical of some of the long-term planning, but nevertheless, guys like Barry, guys like Asnu, guys like Dibbling, really high-ceiling guys who are ready to play now. We brought a lot of those guys in, and that means a lot. And then a guy like Dewsbury-Hall or a guy like Jack Grealish, maybe not the best expenditure of resources, but they're really, really good players, and they're fun to watch. And I think there's something to be said for this fan base just being excited to watch good attacking football again, and we've seen early signs of it. I think some of the reactions in the classic Everton way have gone way overboard. I think we'll see some ups and downs and whatnot, but I'm happy with the window. I'm not gonna be too overly critical. I also think with the caveat that we put this entire structure in place like right as the window was opening, and yet we still managed to do all of this business. It's the first proof of concept of this transfer committee as they're more established. Leaving things to the January window will address the remaining holes if there's business to be done. But the restraint of the committee as well is what really puts it up there for me, is we avoided any just like blatantly bad deals that are going to have horrible long-term consequences. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
I like the two minds there, James. Lee C, who's out there, I think is tremendous, is a great resource out on Discord because he has scouting experience. He understands football very well, a little bit behind the scenes too. He posed this quote, and I think it balances exactly what you said. I suppose the question is, have we moved closer within the last 3 months to being a club that competes for trophies and Champions League qualification, or further away? Again, that's not tomorrow. That's not this year. That's longer term. I agree with them. That's what I think the goal should be. But I understand people wanting to balance that with, can't we be a little better and enjoy ourselves? And people are really enjoying Jack and KDH, and they're having a good time. So curious as to your take on this, Shan, and if you're in kind of those two minds as well.
Yeah, for me, I'm at a 6.5. I think the committee has done a lot of good, and I want to make sure that I appreciate, I'm very balanced about just the hard job that they had in front of them this summer, because I think between a new footballing structure, right, that's not traditional, as well as just the amount of options that you have in front of you. And I think David Moyes has said it a bunch, right? They probably had plan A, plan B for a position, right? And they got denied just because, for one reason or the other, whether the player wanted Europe, whether they've seen highlights of us the last, year or so, and they just don't want to be a part of it, X, Y, Z. But at the same time, we didn't address two of our major needs, right? Right back continues to be a need that we push further away. I will give credit to them for addressing right wing. And you signed two really cerebral 19-year-olds, and that's a big win for the committee. That's a big win for the club. And I think you look at just the overall talent. I know a month ago you probably say this squad really isn't much better on paper, but I mean you look at it now, and I think you can see the rhyme and reason. I think the only thing that also drives it down for me is the ability now for Njai and Jake O'Brien to kind of continue to be pushed out of position. I think that hurts specifically Jake, his development. I mean, Njai's kind of already who he is. He's just a baller. But I also want to say off the pitch, they've done a tremendous job. The Budweiser, the Pepsi sponsorships, right? You look at the Nagoya Grampus strategic partnership. So I can appreciate that. I think they've done a lot of good off the field that will translate to, of course, the transfer market and later markets. But I think 6.5 is a very fair rating. I think there are some missed opportunities here, but at the same time, I do want to give them credit because I think they've done a lot of good. And like we talked about tremendously, Everton have made so many mistakes in the past in the windows with just horrible buys and whatnot. If Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall is probably like the most controversial buy of our window, I think that's a pretty good window, all things considered.
Yeah, I'm going with 5.5. Initially, I was thinking dropping my 6 to a 5, and let me explain to you a couple reasons why. So the positive is, yes, long-term goal. There's a handful of guys with serious talent on this team that I think are good reasons to be excited about. As new, taking over possibly soon for Mikalenko, that type of thing is awesome. Barry, I love his talent. He's a little bit raw. It wasn't cheap necessarily, but I think looking at the market, we did okay. I really like Dibbling as well. I love some of these guys. I think they're in good positions. I think combining them with some of the guys that we already had is great. I love that we avoided some of the obviously bad moves, Souček, Ake, whatever. Third center forward, which is absolutely not needed at all. Dear heavens, so tired of hearing that. I swear, do people not pay attention to what's going on in the league? And again, I recognize Jack and KDH are good players, but again, I still have a problem with that one. That's my first issue with it. It doesn't make sense to me still to have Dewsbury-Hall in when you're bringing in Grealish because you're pushing Njai to right side. It doesn't make any sense to me. Dibbling's ready to play now. I would rather have invested that money, kept Njai at the 10, Charlie can back him up, and invested in a different profile at right wing that maybe can play across the different ways that gives us some pace and directness, because I still don't think we have any pace on this team, really. Or in a right back. I'm sorry, guys. You went into this window with 3 major needs, and you kind of addressed one with Dibbling, but then you moved Njai over to the right. So you didn't really address that. You kind of messed it up. And I know everyone's really excited about how good Grealish is, and I'm glad that Njai has knocked in a couple balls in the far post, but you're not going to get the best out of him. I mean, he lost 12 duels, and him and Jake were a disaster against Wolves, and we were really, really unbalanced. I'm glad we won. It was a good performance, but I think it's a real problem, and I don't think Merlin Röhl is going to come in and settle the midfield for us, and that was a poor Wolves team, so I don't know. And I guess what irritates me, too, a little bit is that I look at the PSR, and it looks fine, I mean, I think we needed to make a book loss of approximately $78 million. PSR numbers like 58.7 based on the prior cases this year. I mean, our wages are probably about the same from last year. Some increase maybe based on the overall club. I mean, amortization increase could have been more than about 30 million. And we made a little bit of money on player trading. So I don't like selling Chermiti either. And I think the one last thing I'll say too is that there's still a year, You can still move Dwight. There's some things that can still happen. January's not that long away, but I just look at this team and I still see, I don't feel great about left back, but that's okay. I can deal with that. I don't like the fact that Jake O'Brien is playing out of position. He should be playing center back right now. And there were right backs to be gotten. And I don't like the idea of Ghana and James Gardner being a starting midfielder. I'm glad that he played well against Wolves. I don't know where this mythology happened that he was so amazing playing out of position against Brighton. I'm glad he did it. He did his job as best he could, but he got murdered by Minte. So I don't know. And I think you're not getting the best out of Njai by playing him at right wing. That's just my take. We'll see. That can evolve. There's some options here. We'll see how it goes. But I just see that midfield, and I don't think it's good enough. And I don't like our right back options. And I think it's a missed opportunity and a bad allocation of resources.
I think that's fair criticism. I guess what I'd push back on or counter with is you take the long-term view. You have multiple windows to build a team. They didn't overextend and buy just anyone outright bad.
Yeah.
It shows me that they recognize the need is there. They just couldn't find the right piece at this moment in time.
Look, that's fair. To look at it and say it doesn't matter what you do necessarily as much now as it means going forward. So it does, to get young players with high potential, it almost doesn't matter where you get them. Okay, you got one at Barry. Maybe you didn't need someone who was a super stud there. You could have gone right back, but does it matter in the long run? The only counter I would say to that is I felt like he had opportunities to play young players immediately at right back and at defensive mid. And I don't understand why we wouldn't take advantage of that. I would also argue I don't understand why you didn't go with the loan or something cheaper for David Moyes' sake. But I guess it's David Moyes that seems comfortable with the setup. Seriously, because that was certainly possible. You would think that option's out there. And that's manager driven. So, and he's got all the power, I think, in this circumstance. Not unbridled power, but I don't know. Anyway, and I also don't want to be too overly concerned about where we finish in the table now. I mean, you've heard what I said on Twitter that people attack me for, but I don't believe in balance, though, either. I think we allocated too much money towards the short term when it doesn't matter because my primary goal is to get us back at the top. And I don't buy this idea that we'll sneak into Europe eventually. That'll give us more revenue when it doesn't. Mathematically, it really doesn't. You'd have to buy more players anyway. We don't even have depth as is. So I don't buy any of that nonsense. And I also don't buy this idea we couldn't attract players because of Europe. I think that was an off-the-cuff comment by Moyes. I don't think it's real. So I don't know. I think we could have done a little bit better, but no major disasters though. I'll say that. And I do think it is a balance to what other fans may want, not what I want, and that's fine.
I also think before we move on, there is something to be said. Like, this committee clearly had a compelling pitch that was able to get a lot of good young players in that want to come play for Everton. Why it didn't work for player X versus player Y, there's a million reasons why that could be. The individual players' preferences, there's all sorts of factors that come into play. Wanting to be in Liverpool versus London versus somewhere else in Europe. Like, there's so many personal preferences that come in. I agree, like the Europe thing, maybe off the cuff in terms of like Fofana, for example, who was like very adamant that he wanted to go like, but that's not every player, and you can sell them around that. So
and I think that's a great point. And for me, it's not like we need to get better so we can attract world-class players. That is not the right way to do this. Those players are wicked expensive, and that makes no sense because we need a ton of them to be competitive with those teams. We need to develop them first. We need more. We need volume. We're so far behind these clubs. The only counter I'd say to that, James, though, we should have known who was going to accept the deal and who wasn't before the window started. And that's what's a little frustrating for me. I felt like there were times, and maybe I'm taking too much to the rumor mill, but like this idea that someone turned us down in the window, to me, that's a failure on our end from a due diligence standpoint. Things can change in the window. I agree with that. But like, to me, I think you should have probably already known that.
How much of that is a byproduct of these guys arrived at the start of the summer? Thelwell was on his way out. How much of a handoff was there? The recruitment team changed dramatically. Obviously, with Purdy leaving, like there were a lot of changes that they had to get their stuff together really quick and move very quickly. You don't have necessarily the time to develop these long-term relationships. So I understand the criticism for sure. I just view it as like a byproduct of how the structure was put in place versus the people on the committee themselves.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, well, then I think the criticism goes to Angus. I mean, ultimately, he's the one in charge of anything. And frankly, if you didn't think Purdy was going to leave, like if that wasn't a suspicion when the second you had your first meetings and, you know, you're running through stuff and like that should have been so obvious. You know what I mean? The last thing that guy wants to deal with is another situation where there's an imbalance of power. You know, and I'm sure he had very strong ideas on how to build this team. And that to me is a contingency that you should have been ready for. How can you have the head of recruitment not replaced immediately? Like, to me, that's a falter. And maybe that is, James, you're right, why some of the business was a little slower than it should have been. But the good thing is, too, like, we could talk about the now in this season. I think that's an interesting conversation, certainly more compelling than it would have been if we were going all young, almost Brighton style, right? And it's probably worth getting into. And I think people are pretty excited and optimistic from Jack's stuff. But I would caution about getting too excited about a terrible performance at Leeds, a pretty lucky performance at home against Brighton, and then a good performance against a very depleted, terrible Wolves side. But I am curious what you guys think. We ran another poll here, Shan, right? And some of the results are interesting.
Yeah, so we did a poll to go through where Everton would finish this season. Some optimistic folks, first through fourth, 2% at 2 votes, fifth through seventh, 3% at 4 votes, eighth through ninth, 27% at 36 votes. Interesting. 10th at 35%, 47 votes. That was the majority. 11th at 18%, 24 votes. 12th at 13%, 17 votes. 13 at 2%, 2 votes. None at 14, and then I put just subjected through groups, 15th through 17th, 1%, 1 vote, and then I left 18th through 20th off because that was 0 votes as well. So going through some listener comments, I think there's some interesting commentary. Nick Navas, just the boisterous Nick Navas. I put 12th. I'm taking into AFCON plus potential injuries. I'm worried about our backline depth. I think that's totally valid. Watt Dog and Andy Watt. Every team has to contend with those. That was a response to Nick's comment, actually. Ghana and Njai are an important player, but it's not loads of players going out, and Njai can be covered by Dibbling and McNeil. And then there's some kind of interesting comments, of course, on the right back piece. One from Darash. Still can't believe we didn't add a right back after Saturday. And then Sleazy Toffee, I want to be happy, but the thought of 4 more months at Jake O'Brien at left back is interfering with this. So I think just as a whole, right? Like I think that poll is actually quite optimistic in my opinion. Like you said, Ryan, like I think there's a bit of recency bias, and us getting 6 points out of 9, of course, didn't look great in many of those moments. I'm curious what you guys think in regards to the poll and just the club as a whole this season.
Yeah, I think the way I looked at it, at least, was kind of looking at kind of the previous table. And I know I should have probably looked at expected points, but, because football's not played on spreadsheets, I can't do that. So, and then I kind of looked at the transfer business as well. And I think it's interesting to look at, how far up could we jump and how far down could we drop? I mean, I think City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, pretty untouchable by us. I mean, there's too much of a talent disparity. Spurs might jump us. I just think Thomas Frank's a massive upgrade from Ange. No offense to him, at least in terms of production. I think they look good early, and boy, they were pretty aggressive in the market, bringing in some talented players and dealing with the loss of James Maddison. Newcastle, Forest, Villa. There's kind of an interesting mix in there. You know what I mean? Like Villa really didn't add too much. They lost Bailey, they lost Ramsey, they added Gasson. I can't remember if they concluded anything else today. Newcastle's probably still good. You know what I mean? Voltamata is really good. Vissa brought in Alonga, Ramsey as well. They did get Aaron Ramsdale, though. We know that's not a good luck charm. Forest, they signed so many players, but the underpinnings seemed concerning. They maybe have a little too much, but I don't know. Curious about that crew. Because if you feel like you can't really go past any of them, I mean, that's what, 8 right there?
Yeah, I think Villa's maybe the one. And Forest, I feel like they do this every window, and it's kind of just like a roll of the dice on how many of these guys are going to work out. And it worked out incredibly well for them last season. No question about it.
What if Nuno goes, maybe?
Yeah, and that seems like the writing's on the wall a little bit there, who they would then try to bring in. I could see them faltering a little bit, but I just think quality-wise, they're still, and certainly depth-wise, pretty far ahead of us. Villa, I could see us potentially, if they have a few injuries, they have lost a lot of their quality. But I still think that's a little bit of a tall task, maybe a window or two away.
I don't think it's going to jump us. I mean, I think they've added to their team, but they still seem pretty dysfunctional. I don't know. Sean, what do you think? Can United jump us? It's possible.
No, I think it's very possible. I think they're just a bit of a car crash right now, and I'm just waiting for the remnants to settle because I think they have some interesting pieces. Cunha's, he potentially had a hamstring injury from the last game, so if they lose him, I think that's a massive loss for them just because I think he's kind of the engine that keeps them going. We did forget that Villa did sign Harvey Elliott on deadline day, so he's really going to come and fix the midfield, Dude. Right?
Why did people still give massive... Was it a big fee? Do we know?
Yeah, I think it was in the 30 million range, so it's pretty high.
Why do people keep giving massive fees to Liverpool? Like, I am convinced half these transfer business deals are just absolute shade ball stuff underneath the table. There's maybe some organized crime linkages. But what about some of the other guys in the middle there? I mean, Brighton still got a lot of talent there. I think that one would be tough. I know we beat them, but we certainly didn't look great doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brighton, to me, is still a mixed bag. Like, if you look at the other... I don't think we can surpass, like you said, Ryan, like any of those other 8. Like, I think Spurs they've bought really well, and I think... getting, as we talked about in our PL preview, I think they've really addressed a lot of the needs. And
I think it can happen, right? I mean, it's football.
Yeah, if they get in their injury crisis they had last season, of course, right? And you compound that with the Champions League schedule, I just think Forest have too much. Now, I will say this, the one position they're probably not deep at is center back. So if one of Merlo or Milenkovic goes down, I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble because they rely too much on those guys. Same with Newcastle, right? Yeah.
I mean, they had so much continuity. Yeah. We got into it in the PL assessment. That's a great point. But I don't see any of them else being, they're not Teflon, but
No. But I think it would be a lot to ask. I'd be pretty surprised if we finished above any of like the kind of others. But Brighton, I think we definitely can. Bournemouth, I think very highly of them. I think they've done a really good job of replacing a lot of their losses in the window. I mean, they've already been off to a good start. They beat Spurs 1-0, at Tottenham. So I think, and I just think Areola is just, he's just still a really good manager. And I think they have done a really good job from their recruitment team of Thiago Pinto, of just kind of, once again, just filling the needs with just players that are adjacent. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if we finished ahead of them, but I think it's unlikely.
Brentford.
I think we should finish above Brentford, personally.
It would be bad if we didn't. Yeah, it would be bad if we didn't. I agree with you, James. I think their losses are pretty massive. When you look at like what Mbeumo did for them last year, I think Norgard's kind of a secret tough loss. Kelleher, right? Like Flecken was playing out of his mind last year, right? So like Kelleher's really got to kind of live up to that. Otuara, I think, was of course a really good buy. I mean, Coyote, we've spoken highly of. They're going to be a threat on set pieces. But I also think, I know Reece Nelson's coming on loan. They have a decent team. Igor Thiago has had a good start to the season. I was pretty high on him coming into the season. I know he's been out. Like, you look at them on paper, they're actually not terrible, but I also think, too, they're just a bit limited. And I feel like that midfield is just not as good as it's been in years past. So I think they're going to struggle. And it's just, when you look at the quality of the Premier League, I think everybody's gotten a little bit better. I think they've kind of just stayed okay to maybe getting a little bit worse just with some of those losses. And like you said, losing Wissa, right? That's a big loss too.
So relying on those two guys last year, Mbeumo and Vissen, I don't think Reece Nelson it really moves the needle like those losses.
No, I'd agree. I think you lose those two big guys up front that were so critical to your offensive output, and Ouattara is your big spend. I just don't think that's nearly enough. I think they'll, at best, tread water and most likely regress a little bit.
I thought Fulham might be vulnerable. I mean, I know Marco's got them pretty tight, and it's a good returning team, so they're in the flow already. But I don't know if we can catch them with the Kevin and Chukwueze moves. I mean, those guys aren't the greatest players ever, but they added enough on deadline day. That should help them, and those guys don't have to play right away.
Yeah, I actually really like their window. I think, of course, they left it to the last day. I believe Tyreek George is also in addition to that, right? So that gives them a little bit depth up front. Kusi Asare. Chukwueze, I don't know if I'm as high on as I was a few years ago. I think he's kind of fallen out a little bit, but Kevin,
he's okay.
I think will be. Yeah, he's okay. I mean, for a loan, right? They don't have any obligation to that, so I think it's a fantastic deal. And that's a position, right, when you look at that lineup, because Castagne's essentially been playing right wing for them. That's a really good just kind of tandem to add to that. So I think they'll be a lot better. And you look at every other position on the pitch for them, they have decent quality. So yeah, I think Marco, although he might not be happy with the league right now, I think he's happy with the overall window. And then you look at Palace. I think Palace just had quite the window. Just you look at just the summer more than anything. I mean, just it's kind of been a soap opera. Of course, losing Eberechi Eze, but on the 11th hour, keeping Mark Gahey, which he's been a real professional, right? And you look at how kind of some players have dealt with the transfer window. He's been, for their captain to kind of do what he's done, you give him appreciate it. Yeremy Pino, I think that's one of the buys of the season. That's really good business. I believe it was around 30 million too, so not a crazy price for a player that I think is so highly talented. So that's a really good coup for Palace. Doesn't look like Maner Salomon's going to go. It looks like Villarreal. Uche, he didn't find his way to Wolves. He didn't find his way elsewhere, but he found his way to Selhurst. And then, of course, J.D. Kenbo, who was not going to be the short-term replacement for Gahey. They were looking at somebody else, but they were going to sign him regardless. So that's just another. You look at Palace and their center backs; they've done a really good job throughout the years of development. So I think just Palace, another probably, and they haven't lost a game in God knows how long. Glasner's got to be happy that he kept Mark Gahey because there were rumors that he might walk out if they sold him on deadline day.
Yeah, I mean, I think Maner Sullivan would have been a big help for them too. I'll tell you what, I thought West Ham was in big trouble. They may still be in some trouble, but I think the help they brought in the midfield with Mateus Fernandes, Magassa, they looked very different You know what I mean? I know those guys weren't in there, but Graham Potter's not that bad a manager. I know people think he's absolutely terrible, but I think that team was just so limited with the guys they had. That's a big boost, but I still think we should finish higher than them. And I mean, guys, Wolves, are they in trouble?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit at the tail end of the last pod in your absence, Ryan.
You also howled in my absence. So
we did.
I'm thinking there's more of whimpering going on right now for the Wolves.
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
don't recreate a whimper of the wolf, please.
We won't
Please
do the
don't
whimper
that
of the
to us.
wolf.
Thank you.
I do think Wolves are kind of in trouble. They did keep Strand Larson. Looked like he had 1 foot out the door. That's pretty big. Arokadare on the deadline day will help them a little bit in attack, but they're still kind of all over the place. Cunha was such a pivotal figure for them. Strand Larson's quite good, not quite the full dynamic attacking figure of Cunha. So I think Wolves are probably going to struggle, find themselves in and among the relegation contenders, to be honest.
They better pray that Andre or João Gomes does not get hurt this season, because they are so light. I mean, those two are incredible, but you look at just the team squad building. They have so many wingbacks on the team. I looked at the roster the other day. It's just so wingback heavy. And you look at just kind of from a forward standpoint, I just think they're so light, right? And it just from a squad makeup standpoint, I think Vitor's got to be a little bit creative if he's going to try to get the most out of them. I'll give Graham Potter credit, for example, right? He went from this back three to a back two. They looked a lot better. You get another guy in the midfield, and now you got somebody like Mateus Fernandes and Magasa. And then, of course, Crescencio Somerville, who we haven't mentioned, right? He's a big help, right? That's just a team that is starving for pace. But yeah, I agree with you, James. I think Wolves are in massive trouble. To not add more to that, they're just so thin.
I mean, to me, it's just a strange composition. They're just going to play a bunch of big guys up top and lump it up to them and hope Arias and Fer Lopez do it all. Fer Lopez is a good player, though. I mean, they may be better than we think. I mean, the thing is that they've got a good midfield. I guess they're going to play direct. I mean, you can't argue with the size up there in some of those guys, and they've got some unique players, but I don't think Tolu is that big a difference maker. And Strand Larson is okay, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, Vitor is an interesting guy. He normally has a bit of a shelf life, decent tactician, but I don't know. I mean, none of the, relegation guys coming up, I think, are going after us. Do we think? I mean, Sunderland's playing better, but I Leeds and Burnley, I wouldn't be remotely concerned about. Florentino Luis maybe helps Burnley a bit, but and they don't look totally incoherent as a team necessarily. But I mean, any of those guys concern you?
Not really. I mean, Burnley, not at all. Leeds, not really at all. Sunderland, I just can't. They've improved dramatically. They've spent a ton of money. They've made some solid signings. It might be just enough to keep them up, but I don't see them finishing above Everton.
No, I think there's 5 guys down there if you throw in West Ham that I think are probably going to be down there, at least, and that we feel pretty confident that we should finish above. Palace, Fulham in the mix. Brentford, I think, could join those crew, maybe make that a six pack. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. And that places us, safely. Look, mission accomplished a little bit, We shouldn't have to worry about relegation. We came out of the box pretty hot, at least in terms of results. And I understand why people are feeling good. It'd be nice to, from the beginning, not be concerned about going down. And I think we've made the investments to ensure that that happens.
Yeah, and of course, you look at the health of our team, right? Once we get Jared back, I think that adds a massive boost to our defense. And it's just nice to have depth, right, in certain positions. Of course, we look at from the overall future goals, right, how might not have been the best business at certain points. But I feel like it's just looking at our bench even on Saturday, right, how much more refreshed it was. And it's just exciting now to have options, right, that David Moyes, who I think we've all agree is a very good manager, to give a guy like that the ability to kind of, tinker with some guys like Merlin Röhl. I'm excited to see how he's used in a team like this, right, because I think he's a box-to-box, as you mentioned, Ryan, very well. It's just we have options to play different ways, and I also think, too, the talent now backs it up, right, and that, for me, as an Everton fan, you can't really ask much more in the present.
God, I just look at this team with the strong right back option and a defensive mid, and
sure, yeah,
pretty good. Again, I'm trying not to be of two minds. I've said what I've said before, but I think for a low output, you could really have solidified the team even further. And there's some free agents out there, so maybe that's what we opt to do. You never do know. Hopefully not Josh Brownhill, just my personal opinion. But yeah, I think that's it. So good dialogue with you guys too. I'm not changing my number, but yeah, I mean, look, a lot can happen still. You never know what else. International break though. We got to talk about something, right? Still a little bit of a crazy day for sure. I swear there's still deals going through.
This was a crazy day across the league. It was relatively quiet on the Everton front, but they did get one last signing over the line. And I think we haven't really mentioned or talked about a ton, the output of this team under David Moyes once he took over from Sean Dyche. He definitely exceeded expectations in terms of the team performance based on the personnel that we had. It's much better personnel, guys that he's hopefully happy with at the close of the window. I think Moyes himself would say probably would have been happy to get a couple more deals over the line, but so is life, and it is the start of hoping for just pure stability this season from Everton and a foundation to build upon.
Could still be sales too. You never know. And there is always January, but yep, we're certainly looking better, and it should be a little more relaxing at least, right, gents?
I certainly hope so, and I hope there's more things to be a little excited about as fans, because we know it's been far too long. So with that, it's going to do it for us on this episode of The Blue Frontier. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate the support. As a reminder, leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice. We did hit 100 on Apple, so thanks to those who left a review, but let's shoot for 125 next. I'm just going to keep raising the bar. Join our Discord. Great dialogue, great discussion amongst our listeners. So with that, we'll leave you till next time. Until then, up the Toffees.